are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me today, it's the one and only Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Well, if you had asked me that question all the way up through Thursday evening, really into Friday morning, I would have told you that I'm doing pretty good.
Okay.
And then Chuck Fletcher dropped his drawers and dropped a deuce on it. So...
Okay.
In case you haven't heard by now, we're just jumping straight into it. The lead story today on the You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast is going to be Tony DeAngelo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try really hard not to put too much energy into this because he doesn't deserve it. In case you're unfamiliar, Tony DeAngelo is, shall we say, a questionable human being. I'm going to say allegedly because I'm not trying to get sued here. Allegedly had a Parler account. Allegedly had multiple burner accounts. Allegedly had this. Allegedly had that. Was suspended in the OHL twice, including at least once for a violation of the league's language policy regarding homophobic, abusive language. We don't know exactly what was said, but it was,
the technical, I think, term for it was something about it's like language and diversity type of thing.
Right.
Which you can piece together the words that go in between that type of stuff.
We don't need to go into it, but he was saying derogatory things to a teammate nonetheless. That's a theme that we'll get to later.
That's the way I've been putting it, kind of like in my head. I'm like, right. He said some derogatory.
There was also an abusive official incident that got him suspended later in his junior career. I
think that happened multiple times also because I think he did it in the AHL too.
And he was also suspended in the NHL for abusive official as well. But wait, you might say, that was several years ago. He's learned. He's gone to therapy, which he's talked about. He's gone to counseling. He has apologized. He is a different person. He is just coming off a 1-year prove-it deal in Carolina that he signed because the New York Rangers jettisoned him. He got punched in the face by a teammate, and the team sided with the guy who punched him. That should tell you all you need to know about Tony DeAngelo and the kind of person that the Philadelphia Flyers have brought into their locker room. Now, you might be asking, well, was it cheap? Is he signing as a free agent? No! Chuck Fletcher gave up 3 draft picks, including a second, a third, and a 4th-round pick for the rights to sign him as an RFA, to which he then signed him to a 2-year, $5 million per season extension.
Okay, hold on. I'm stopping you right there for a second. Because
okay.
We need to do some clarification on the deals here.
Please.
First of all, the contract extension is not official, so I want to tread
that's
lightly.
Fair. That is fair.
Tread lightly on the 2-year, $5 million per.
That is the number that's being floated around, but it is not official yet.
It is not official, and he has not signed yet. That's the first part.
That's fair.
In fairness, and this is a good point, the draft pick thing. It was 3 draft picks staggered over multiple draft years.
Fair.
And as an RFA, if you would have offer sheeted the guy, you would have given up a 1st-round pick next year and a 3rd-round pick next year to get him.
Okay.
Just for an offer sheet.
Right.
So instead of giving up a 1st-round pick, you had to trade a 2nd and a 4th to make it balance out. And the 4th is 3 years down the line. The 2nd is 3 years down, right? Yeah, the 2nd is 3 years down the line. The 4th was this year.
They're staggered. The 4th was this year. The 3rd is next year. The 2nd is in 2024.
My problem with the draft picks is not in the deal. It's not in this deal itself. And I'll elaborate on that as we go through the discussion because I'll get to we need to talk about him as a player too to get to that point where I explain why I don't like the draft pick compensation thing going on here.
So the 2nd-round pick being in 2024 is part of my problem because there's a real chance Chuck Fletcher's not the general manager at the 2023 draft. And that's not even talking about the 2024 draft. I'm talking about next year.
Right.
And I'm still fully of the opinion that if Chuck Fletcher's gone, we should be heading towards a rebuild. Because at a certain point, you just have to accept failure. And we'll get into a little bit of a bigger discussion about Bob Clarke and Paul Holmgren, I'm sure, later on. Because make no mistake, by the way, this was not a Chuck Fletcher move. This was Paul Holmgren and Bob Clarke saying, go get this kid. Because make no mistake.
I don't know about that completely.
No, make no mistake. The kid is an offensive dynamo. He is everything we wanted Shane Gostisbehere to be. To be fair, and that's the only comparison we can make.
Not wrong that it's a team effort in terms of this group of people gets together and signs off on everything. So when it happens, yes, or it feels like they sign off on everything. You're not wrong about that,
right?
I'm not sitting here telling you they're in the room completely. For all I care, they're sending a text message to somebody going, "Hey, by the way, what do you think, Tony DeAngelo?" Right? It still means you're asking for an input.
Oh, I think at minimum, I think Chuck Fletcher probably knows that he's managing for his job at this point. And
absolutely.
He's going to be bringing in the best personnel kind of regardless of moral character, as we see here, or future costs, right? That second in 2024 has the potential of being kind of the 33rd, 35th pick in the draft if the Flyers are bad at that point. That could be a solid draft pick.
You're talking about the second, right?
Yeah, and then I didn't know that's in a couple of years, and we're talking about a guy who's not going to play till 2027, 28, blah, blah, blah. I understand that, and I know we're talking down the road. Mm-hmm. But that's the problem with this team, is that every decision is made for the next 18 months. And who is the last person who thought beyond that time frame? Ron Hextall? We saw what happened to him. When is the last time the Philadelphia Flyers had a plan beyond 2 years, outside the Ron Hextall era? Has it ever been the case?
Well, no, it hasn't been the case because that's the way they operate.
Right.
I'm sorry. If everybody wants to hear the word rebuild, it's not coming. They don't know. It's not in their vocabulary. They've never rebuilt this team. Never. And It's not going to happen now. It's just not. That being said, well, first of all, the Hextall thing is different because did he have a plan with a vision that lasted more than a couple, 18 months, like you're saying? Yeah, he did. Was he also a complete tyrant? Yes.
Fair.
You've got to be careful with the method of the madness behind the method here.
You don't want to give him too much power in the organization. I understand.
Right, whether or not that has to do with he didn't listen to people, whether or not that had to do with the alumni getting shut out, and that's what pisses everybody off and says, get rid of this guy because he's been now. Granted, as an alum himself.
Speaking of prickly relationships, you're aware of the whole Evgeny Malkin contract situation, right?
Well, sure. I mean,
quick little detour here. Speaking of Ron Hextall pissing players off. So, in case you haven't heard, several Pittsburgh Penguins free agents are up for new contracts this season, including Chris Letang, who recently signed an extension, and Evgeny Malkin, who has not. And it is starting to circulate that he may not be particularly happy with how negotiations are going. And I got to tell you, couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
What, Malkin?
Yeah.
Okay.
All of the above.
I want to see something for a second because I want to make sure I got this from the right.
They got their cups. They can just move to Kansas City already.
Sure. Whatever you want to say about that. Okay. By the way, and this is not like a report, but just a thought on while you mentioned Malkin, I got a text from somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody kind of thing that said, "Don't be surprised if Detroit makes a play for Malkin."
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
But I'm just telling you what that's something that I've heard.
The eyes are playing.
And it doesn't at all sound far-fetched at all because you look at the way that team has the youth kind of coming through. Maybe that's the guy you go for. And we're going to talk about another veteran free agent who could have a likely destination because there's a heavy youth movement somewhere else, and we'll get to that in a minute. But
yeah, let's circle back to Tony DeAngelo here. We can talk about kind of the goings on around the trades.
Did you actually finish your thought, or did you get sidetracked by the Bob Clark, Paul Holmgren?
I'm sure I probably got sidetracked. But the thing is, okay, so you're bringing this guy in, and you're probably going to pay him a lot of money. Mm-hmm. If this $5 million is where it comes to be,
right?
He's right up there. He's getting paid like a top 4 guy,
mm-hmm.
and he's probably going to be your power play 1 guy. That's kind of why you're bringing him in. He's one of the most offensively dynamic defensemen in the league. I will give him that.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is his 5-on-5 is fine. He is essentially Shane Gostisbehere.
Right.
Like I said, maybe a little bit. Okay, if rookie Shane Gostisbehere was slightly more sustainable, Like, remember when he came in with just that head of steam and was lit the world up for 40 games? Tony DeAngelo has essentially transposed that across, a 200, 300 game NHL career, or however long he's been in the league at this point. Like, I will give him credit for that. On the ice, he is a very solid player, especially on the offensive side of the puck.
Mm-hmm.
But are you willing to drop someone who has been essentially a ticking time bomb? And,
sure.
We talk about the Tom Wilsons and the Brad Marchands, and eventually the on-ice shenanigans are going to cost you. And that's not necessarily what you're worried about with DeAngelo, although he has shown a little bit of a temper on the ice, especially when the team goes through a little bit of a losing skid.
Right. All right.
Which I'm a little worried about, given how last season went. Hello?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
But it seems to me as though he's a firework. And we're talking less than a week after the 4th of July here.
Right.
And the Flyers were a bit of a powder keg last year.
Right.
And we have just dropped a live firework into a powder keg. And put John Tortorella as the head coach.
Right.
Does anybody else smell gas? Like, does anybody else think it's about to blow up in all our faces here?
All right, so you've left me with a lot to unpack.
Sure.
Right? Okay. So let's start with an agreement of something, which is you can't deny the checkered past. It's there, it exists, and everybody there's a lot of people out there with the comments like, why are so many people bringing this stuff up? Why are they writing this? Because we have to.
Because it matters.
No, we have to right now because basically this isn't – I don't care if the kid's local, okay? I don't care that Tony DeAngelo is local. You have to – my job is they acquired this player. Here's your introduction to this player.
Yep.
And this is what his career consists of. So I have to detail that. Now, in saying that, and I want to lead off when I talk about him going forward – my job is to cover him as an athlete playing in Philadelphia.
Yep.
Every game preview I write, I do a top, here's the team leaders, top 5 guys in points. If he's in the top 5 in points, his name's getting listed, whether you like the guy or not.
Sure.
Because that's factual too. He plays for the team and he's among the top 5.
And your job is to report the facts about the team. And I think we all understand that.
Sure. Now that's twofold because that means his on-ice successes get reported. I can't just gloss over him scoring a goal. If he scores a goal, he scores a goal.
Sure.
If
you'll have to tweet out a graphic for him.
If something happens, then it's our job to get behind it here. If there's a report that comes out hey, he had a fight with so-and-so.
Oh, trust me. We'll be talking about it.
Then but then it's our job to do it. It's our job to, if it comes out, you got to bring it to light.
Right.
Because that's how everything else has happened. If there's conduct detrimental to the team.
Oh, man, I haven't heard that phrase since Drew Rosenhaus was in town.
Oh, boy. I really don't.
When do we get Tony DeAngelo doing sit-ups in his driveway? Come on now.
I really don't like the fact that you just threw my name in the same, me in the same sentence as Drew Rosenhaus. I really don't like that for some reason. It makes
Next question.
It makes me feel like I need to move on here.
Next question.
But, we're going to be here for all of that, right? My job is to be here for every ounce of it.
Oh,
now, look,
if you're listening to this podcast, we are here for the good, the bad, the ugly, and apparently the Tony DeAngelo.
No, here's what I will say this. It is a fact, true statement here. His year in Carolina, he was well behaved, and whether and that depends. That can depend on a lot of factors. One
Small
is
market, easy to stay under the radar.
That is one. You're right.
May or may not be in the South.
Well, hold on.
That's a joke.
That is one. No, but okay. The South thing is a joke.
That was a joke.
I know. The small market thing is true, though.
I know.
It's not New York and it's not Philadelphia.
He can walk around Piggly Wiggly and not get recognized. 100%. I know.
Sure. Okay, that's number one. Number two, something that I do think the Flyers actually have that can benefit this a little. He had Rod Brindamore last year, and he's going to have John Tortorella now, and these are coaches that first of all, know how to talk to players, and second of all, preach. I don't think they just preach structure on the ice; they preach it off too. You better be able to uplift your own teammates and
especially
and harmonize that locker room. And
but there was some dissonance at times. He got discordant in Carolina. He expressed some unpleasantness. He was healthy scratched a couple times.
Was he? I don't remember that.
I believe he was.
I don't remember that.
I might be wrong about that, but I believe he missed a couple of games.
I know he was healthy scratched regularly with the Rangers toward the end.
Well,
yeah.
When the guy who's not even going to be your future starter punches you in the face, right? When they just traded Alexander Georgiev for, quite frankly, not a whole lot. So they really picked the temporary backup goalie over the 40-goal pace defenseman. Just so you know, just for some context. And I know you know that.
Right, but everybody else.
If you're listening to this show, a defenseman who can score 40 got waived. The entire league passed on him, and it wasn't because of his contract. He wasn't making that much money. They bought him out.
Yeah, they did it to completely get rid of him.
And then they made the Eastern Conference Finals. Hello.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, that's not the only reason they made the Eastern
Conference understand.
Finals, but yes, I get your point.
But it doesn't help, or it doesn't hurt.
So I do think the coaching styles are similar. Like, you know, a Rod Brindamore had to keep him in check.
High expectations.
And a John Tortorella's got to keep him in check. That's part two of this, you know. So, yes, he played in a small market, which helps. Yes, he played for a coach like Rod Brindamore. And I guess the third thing would be, you know, Carolina only won the Metropolitan Division. Like, they were good.
They were very good.
So, you actually said the number one trigger problem, which is losing triggers him. You know, he doesn't like to lose. And listen, there's nothing wrong with being a person.
And he would hate that you're calling him triggered too. That's the funniest part.
Well, no, but how else would you like me to describe it? Like, usually the source of these on ice or locker room incidents has to do with long losing stretches or poor play from himself.
And it's funny that you say that, because the only other player I've seen do that over the last, not the only other player. We've had a lot of Flyers give up over the last couple of years. But in my opinion, one of the worst defenders of that, especially during that shortened 2020 season, and by guilty of, I mean giving up when the team goes on a little bit of a losing streak.
Yeah.
You have any ideas?
You're talking the 2021?
The shortened 2021 season, the 56 gamer. Yep.
Okay. Because I was going to say, short in 2020, I'm thinking like they went into the bubble doing pretty well, so it probably wasn't that.
No.
I'm trying to think of
who looked bad during that season, especially when the team started going south. He may or may not have commented on the Instagram post.
Oh, I see. I'm so not on Instagram.
Oh, no, I just saw the post because Tony DeAngelo gave his, I'm so happy to be a Flyer, and I can't wait to pull on the orange and black.
Well, hold on a minute. You mean the guy who also tweeted he was done with Philly when they didn't draft him? Look. If you're gonna come in with baggage, prepare for it to be unpacked a little bit. You know, like that's part of the deal here. This is the way people cover you. But anyway,
I've talked on this show about a bit of a cult forming in the Philadelphia Flyers locker room. And I have jokingly referred to it as the Johnny Gaudreau tampering committee, and that's something we will talk about a little bit later when we talk about free agency, by the way.
Is that really what it is, though, or is it really just, at this point, is it just the Kevin Hayes friend club?
And that's exactly where I'm going here. Because this upcoming roster is going to have Kevin Hayes. It's going to have Cam Atkinson. It's going to have Tony DeAngelo. It's going to have Patrick Brown, right? I'm still not convinced that they won't bring Keith Yandle back, even though I don't necessarily think they will.
No, I think that
it may very well have Johnny Gaudreau, like I mentioned. We'll talk about that a little bit later. That's a large chunk of your locker room.
It becomes it, yeah. Would you just give 5 players? That's a quarter of your lot. It's 25% of your lot.
And it's a lot of veterans on a team that's going to have a lot of young bodies on it this year. That's a big chunk of your veteran core.
Right.
And I am severely worried. I mentioned the powder keg a little bit earlier. I mentioned John Tortorella standing outside, smoking a cigar, ready to flick it onto the barrel. I'm not saying it's going to go poorly, because I do see a world where this team comes together and wins 12 out of the first 16 and just rolls.
You know what I want to do right now, based on where you're going with this? I feel like this is almost a time to collect receipts, and this has nothing to do with DeAngelo.
Okay.
Collect receipts from the people who don't love, and I'm not saying I'm in love with the Tortorella hiring, but for the people who are so against it, it's if you're thrilled with the way with the direction this team is going during this season, if he somehow brings this whole group together, then you've got to acknowledge he's a great coach. You have no choice. If they overachieve this year because of John Tortorella leading the charge here, you have no choice but to accept how great of a coach he is, because the whole roster in its current construction screams that it's going to blow up in their face.
Yep.
And if it does not, then you have to give credit where it's due to the coach that's there every day.
Yep. If this team does anything, if this team makes some sort of magical, mystical, blah, 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 it has to start early. And it has to start very early without Joel Farabee, because he's missing the first couple of months of the season, correct?
Yeah. It's one of the biggest concerns for me. Now,
if you can come out and start 12, if you can start 12-4-2, and you win 12 of your first 18 games, and the ball's rolling, and the boys are gelling, and, Joel Farabee's getting close, and things are coming together, and the boys are learning the system, and Carter Hart's playing well, and Ryan Ellis is back, starting to get healthy, and maybe. And if you've been listening to this show for a while, all I want to do is sit here and tell you about how they're going to win 60 games and win the Metro, because that's just who I am. But that's not what I see for this team and this offseason and the moves Chuck Fletcher has made. Quite frankly, the moves Chuck Fletcher has made have been at very bare, basic bones minimum questionable. And I could easily make an argument that they've been atrocious.
So I want to go back. Let me circle back for a second.
Yeah.
Because you brought up Farabee and the injury there. And I want to tie all this back together with DeAngelo, because of the fact that the reason this is such a big deal is because of what it means, what it represents, what the whole deal is going to represent. Because, first of all, why do you make this trade? Strictly from a hockey standpoint, why do you make this trade? You make this trade because you don't know what you're getting with Ryan Ellis right now. And basically, 1 week after you said, we'll see,
he's about to start his rehab.
Progressing a little bit, but there's hope, but there's we can't be certain. You just admitted you don't think he's going to be ready for the season. Why would you sign trade for a guy's rights and then sign him for $5 million a year? You can't afford that type of contract pretty much unless you put Ryan Ellis on LTIR. It's really the only way it works. So you went from saying hopefully to almost a indirect admission he's not going to be ready.
Right.
Now let's take DeAngelo's role, and this is why I don't like this trade, because you hit the nail on the head. To me, I put him in the same tier defenseman as Travis Sanheim and Rasmus Ristolainen, in the sense that he's good at something, but he's not good at everything.
Right.
Or not even that. I don't want to say that about Sanheim, because I think Sanheim can play both ends of the ice. I don't want to say he's not good at both ends, but he's not great, right?
Right.
So he's in that level where you know what you're going to get, and it falls into that second pairing at best, right? So now what you're either doing is that DeAngelo is either, if that contract is to be exact what it is, he's either a very cheap first pairing replacement for Ellis, where at that point, to me, you are stretching it with his ability, because, I'm sorry, putting him next to Ivan Provorov is not putting him next to Jacob Slavin.
Well, and there's rumors that, Ivan Provorov may be being looked at as a potential trade candidate. So, that's not even necessarily who he would be playing against, but there's definitely a lot of offseason left.
Right. So take it the other way. That's the high end of what they could try to do with him. He's the direct Ryan Ellis replacement, and he falls in line with that first pairing, plays with Ivan Provorov, but he's not really a first pairing guy.
Right.
Then you take the alternative, which is, right now, as of Thursday, they had a gigantic question mark with Ellis on the top pairing, and they had Nick Seeler playing next to Cam York, because there's time to figure out who the bottom pairing guy was. Free agency rolls around, you get a low risk, high reward type guy. You try. We talked about this last week. You try to replicate Keith Yandel without it being hey, a guy who you have to play for the Ironman streak. Like, you get a guy who you think can fill that role nicely next to a young player, right? Like, you know, a name who I don't remember exactly who floated it out on Twitter, so forgive me for that, because I've seen so much this week, it's hard to keep track. But somebody floated the name Dylan DeMello out there, and I'm like, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
You know, throw a guy like that next to Cam York on the third pairing, and he's cheap, and you got exactly what you needed, right?
Sure.
Like, that's what you go for. If this is where DeAngelo plays, $5 million for a third pairing defenseman / power play specialist is a joke.
And you're putting them next to one of your kids. And there's that risk of, again, you're just talking about a toxic personality. You have to consider it. I don't want him in the locker room with Joel Farabee. Nonetheless, Cam York.
Well, he's going to be, though. That's the problem.
I know.
Like, you can't take that away.
I know. That's why I'm not happy about this trade.
Right. But you're basing, you're basing a lot of it off of the loose cannon that he could be.
Right.
I'm looking at, to be honest.
Purely from a hockey perspective. That's fair.
No. It's not that I'm trying to dismiss it, though. It's just I'm sitting here going, it doesn't even make sense from a hockey perspective. Like, it's no secret, okay? Like, listen, you knew this the second that Carolina signed him, and the Flyers were trying to get him last year too.
Right.
It was out there, that it was possible, but it never worked out that way. But you knew from the second that even Carolina picked him up that, like, listen, morals don't mean jack in professional sport.
Nope.
If you think a guy can help you win, you're gonna pick him up, whether you think he's got a, whether you think he's a saint or whether you think he's a horrible human being.
Right.
Like, it doesn't seem matter. We've seen it in every professional sport. So really, like, there's no exception to the rule here. Every sport's got them. But I just looked at the hockey fit and I'm going, either you think the guy's an Ellis replacement, which he's not, or he's an incredibly overpaid, exactly what Shane Gostisbehere was supposed to be. Like, role-wise, third pairing power play.
Do you think he's it's a player you just compared him to not that long ago? Do you think he's an upgrade over Travis Sanheim and maybe he's on his way out the door? Because I don't think Chuck's done. I certainly don't think we're done here.
I don't think Travis Sanheim is out the door now.
Okay.
I think that if this season goes off the rails, he's gone at the deadline because he's going to be one of the easiest trade chips you've got to move.
Oh, yeah.
Like, who wouldn't want a guy in that age group, that level, like, can play?
Theoretically, you're getting a first-round pick for Travis Sanheim at the deadline. You need to.
I think you could, yeah.
Theoretically.
And I don't, like, this is the thing I don't want to dismiss with DeAngelo, that he's going to put up points.
Sure.
If he's going to play on this power play, and depending on what else you decide to do from here, he's going to get points. I don't know if he's going to get 50. I know that I've had arguments about another stat that he had last season that I don't think will be replicated, because a lot of people were sitting here going, he was a plus 30 last year.
That ain't happening on this team.
Since when was Ghost ever that good? And here's the thing I shot back. Ghost's career best plus minus is a plus 10.
Yep.
Not great, obviously, especially when you're as offensive as you get the point though, right?
Sure. So
DeAngelo's career high now is plus 30, but that was from the year in Carolina when you play with Jacob Slavin.
With a wagon.
Right. And behind you is Brett Pesce and Brady Shea and Ian Cole and
by the way, Freddie Anderson in net for a large chunk of the year. Like, yeah.
Right. Like, I don't even go to that, because for all I care, you could, like, I'm trying to pick somebody. Listen, you could have Pavel Francouz in net like Colorado did, and if you got a wagon of defensemen in front of you,
yeah, you're right.
You can get some good support. That team has good, I wouldn't say good. Good is too underrated.
Plus minus is a team stat. They had a good offense.
It is. What I'm trying to say, like what I was trying to get is that, so before that, his career best plus minus was plus 12.
Right.
So it's not that much better than what Ghost ever gave. Now, the one thing I will give DeAngelo over Ghost is that Ghost has, like, his best offensive seasons are either too staggered or whatever. Like, we can have this argument again next year if Gostisbehere goes out, plays for Arizona again, and has another 50-point season.
Right.
Now he's done it 2 years in a row, and you kind of can take away the staggered, well, he was really good one year, then he wasn't, like that kind of thing. Like, DeAngelo has never approached Gostisbehere's career best in points.
Right.
He's never come close to the 65 that Gostisbehere had in year 3 of his career.
Man, that year was great.
Oh yeah, but DeAngelo has probably done it with more consistency when you think about just from a production standpoint. But I'm sitting here going, first of all, you have to expect that he's not going to be that much of a problem defensively with Provorov, which you've got to, first of all, you got to make up your mind. I mean, like, maybe the only way that works is if you have him be the puck mover and you somehow convince Provorov, don't be the mobile guy.
Right.
Stay back and play defense as best you can. But,
and quite frankly, I think Ivan Provorov's good enough to do that and do it well.
Right.
But we'll see.
I mean, Ivan Provorov's never, unfortunately, Ivan Provorov's never going to be Victor Hedman, you know? Like, you've got to level with that at some point, right? But so either like DeAngelo's going to be able to, like, could theoretically do that, but he's going to give up some.
Yep.
And then again, like, you can get any power play guy you want in here. Like, Gostisbehere was labeled as that too. If power play stinks, the power play stinks.
True.
Like,
and it's not going to live and die by your point man most of the time.
Well, actually, worse than that is, how many times when Gostisbehere was here did on the power play, like, that's where they're trying to get it to, so it was easy to stack the middle with shot blockers.
Right.
Now, if you change that, and there's various ways to change that narrative with your power play. First of all, by the way, one of the things we can't even talk about with the power play is that they don't have a coach yet.
Right.
There is still a vacancy for an assistant coach who's going to run that whole thing and go from there. And
hey, by the way, I'd like to officially take this opportunity to throw my name in that ring. You can tweet us at YWT Podcast. Bob, Bill, you didn't listen to the rest of this podcast, right? No, just listen to this part and hire me. Cool.
But, well, who they... Like, realistically, a guy they could go back to because it was one of the most successful power play units they ever had. When Joe Mullen was coaching that power play, and Joe Mullen's coaching in a 3-on-3 league right now.
We could get that.
Like, why not?
Does he want to get back on an NHL bench?
I don't see why anybody wouldn't.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
But that's a conversation for another day.
Here's probably my biggest issue, kind of trying to put a little bit of a bow on the defenseman we traded for here.
Oh, you're going to do that. Okay.
Oh, I plan on calling him by his jersey number and his jersey number exclusively once we know what that's going to be. Just for the record, I don't plan on saying this name quite as often as...
We do know it, by the way. 77.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, God, that's just a stupid number. Whatever.
He's won his whole career, though.
It doesn't make it any less stupid.
Okay, whatever.
My problem here is the asset management, right? We have compared him to Shane Gostisbehere.
Okay.
We traded a second and a seventh for Shane Gostisbehere, and then a second, a third, and a fourth to get this guy who we're about to sign for more than Shane Gostisbehere.
Can I stop you for a second with this? Because you're not wrong.
Are you going to read the whole list, including Ristolainen and Hag and all that nonsense? Yeah. Oh, give it to me. I love this. Hey, Chuck, when you get fired, this is what we're going to put on your exit letter. Okay, go ahead and read it.
You traded the first trade that was made was Gostisbehere with the 2 picks, which was a second and a seventh. The seventh was from this year, right? It was a 22 seventh and a 22 second. So all that was, you did all of that just to get the money
dump the
off
salary.
And actually, in theory, not a bad trade. You don't like giving up the picks,
right.
But not a bad trade when you're sitting here trying to say, we don't know what else to do with this guy. And I agreed with that kind of. I'm like, I don't know where else to put Gostisbehere at this point if you don't think he can be sheltered in a third pairing role. If you don't even feel that, then he shouldn't be on your team anymore. Move him.
Right.
Literally the nenext day, or I think it was about the next day.
It was less than 24 hours later, for sure.
Take the cap money they just got. Trade it to basically trade for a player who takes up all of it.
I will not ever forget where I was when I heard that we were making they were making this trade.
Well, and I have a point to this too for a second because we'll get to this. So you trade that though in the Ristolainen deal. Ristolainen comes over to the Flyers. Also in the deal, like where for the player that absorbs all the cap space he just freed up, is Robert Hagg and the 2021 first round pick that you were supposed to make that night at 13th overall gone, and there was a third in there too. I believe that was that same year also. I think it was 2021 also, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. Now you've just moved 3 more picks, and we detailed what the 3 are: the 2022 fourth, 2023 third, which, in fairness, smart asset management with the thirds to say the lowest of the 3 we have.
Right.
That's smart.
Sure.
And a 2024 second, which, again, here's the other thing about the 2024 second, by the way. It's a second. It could very well be a high second. But you also acquired a 2024 first for Claude Giroux that you still have right now.
That's fair.
You do still have it. That's fair to say. But nonetheless, that's 7 draft picks. And okay, fine. Let's call it 6 to do the net here because you got a 7th back this year for him too.
Woohoo.
Like with the deal, yeah, I know. So 6 draft picks and 2 defensemen, which in theory, over the course of 3 trades, by the way, which I literally called it on the air on Friday when the deal was made. I said, that's an awful lot of movement and activity to do a whole lot of nothing to your roster or to your defensive corps.
Spinning your wheels.
Because to me, you acquired a player in DeAngelo now who's too similar to the guy you started this whole cycle with. You traded Gostisbehere and got DeAngelo later on. It's not that different. I'm not sure. DeAngelo is better than Gostisbehere is.
Right,
yes. As
sure.
a hockey player, DeAngelo is better. But they're too similar in role. They're too similar in style. You had the guy.
Yep.
And you roundaboutly a year later traded for the same guy. And then in theory, again, Rasmus Ristolainen's probably a better defenseman than Robert Haig.
Sure.
But what's their calling card? They're physical.
Yep.
Both of them. So you didn't change much other than saying, hey, look, we've got bigger names, I guess.
And we're paying them way more.
We're paying them more. Right. Like, that's about it. Like
that to me sounds like a symptom of you better win. Hey, Chuck, you better start winning. Hey, Chuck, where are those wins coming?
Sure, because if he doesn't win, he's getting fired.
Yep. And one of the things that Steve Dangle will say on the podcast, and I think he said he heard it from somebody. It might have been Jeff Merrick.
Okay. I didn't listen to this.
Just in general, it's just something they've said before.
Okay.
It wasn't on this specific podcast.
Okay, I was gonna say I haven't listened to anything since they.
When you're an NHL GM and you call for help getting out of a cap situation or moving a player you need moved or something like that, when you call for help, opposing GMs don't throw you life vests. They throw you anchors.
Right.
And Chuck sure keeps catching anchors just as best he can. Just Rasmus Ristolainen right to the chest.
Okay, so there is one counter to Ristolainen. Okay, no, there is, and I'll tell you the difference. Okay, because this offseason right now, like, what's the next step from here? The next step is when free agency gets going. We know the big name that's linked to the Flyers, right?
Right.
By all accounts, if they were to go out and sign Johnny Gaudreau, again, right or wrong on the aggressive nature of it and whether or not it's going to work, is it not a good PR move to go acquire a local kid like Gaudreau who's got a squeaky clean track record?
Right. Johnny Hockey is the most wholesome man in the NHL.
Well, you're right, but who's got a squeaky clean track record, who's also an all-star level player, superstar level player who you would throw in the middle of your lineup when you know how bad attendance was down. Isn't that a good PR move?
Yeah.
And a good business decision to say, hey, listen, we can at least sell tickets by getting this guy.
Isn't the Tony DeAngelo move at least equally as poor from a PR perspective?
Well, yes, it is, but this is where I'm going with this. When they traded Gostisbehere last offseason and then acquired Ristolainen, it wasn't the first thing they did. The first move they made, not knowing what was to come, was Ryan Ellis for Nolan Patrick and Phil Myers.
That's fair.
And everybody was on board with that trade because it was the exact type of defenseman you wanted next to Provorov. So even though you weren't thrilled with Ristolainen, like, do you almost remember how within 24 hours after Ristolainen was acquired, the Atkinson-Voracek trade happened and everybody kind of was back on board like, oh, hey, wait, that's a good one.
Yeah, we were willing. We thought at the time that Chuck was doing okay. He was 2 for 4.
Well, 2 for 3, I would say. Well, yeah. Well,
with the Gostisbehere move in there, too.
Yeah, but but here's the thing. I kind of came around to the Gostisbehere and Ristolainen trade-off with the cap because they freed up $3 more million with
That's
Voracek.
valid. That's fair.
All of a sudden, I went, okay, now I see what you tried to do because whether Ristolainen's not the centerpiece of the blue line for the acquisitions. You're trying to say bump him down to the 2 and to the second pairing and see if that makes a difference because Ellis will be up there. Because didn't it in the beginning look like it made a difference? Right. And then you also brought in Atkinson and you said, okay, listen, here's a guy who's a shoot first guy, scores more often than Voracek does, and hey, by the way, he's $3 million cheaper.
If he never plays, those 4 games of Ryan Ellis are going to go down as the biggest what if, and one of the biggest what ifs in Philadelphia Flyers history.
Yeah, absolutely. But like to me, at least Ellis set the tone. Like that's the first one, and you're going, okay, I see the merit behind this. This is a good trade. And then you continue to work your way through the rest of them, and it's like, yeah, you didn't love giving up picks. Like, I don't think people overly ridiculed the Gostisbehere trade in the moment because it was, yeah, we freed up. Like, I don't love giving up those picks, but you freed up the cap space, which means something's coming. You're positioning yourself for something. When Ristolainen was the next move, it was like, that's what you positioned yourself for? Are you nuts? And then you followed it up with, hey, wait a minute, though, Atkinson for Voracek. And it's like, oh, wait a second.
Back on board.
That's another thing that kind of positively spins this thing a little bit. And you all of a sudden were like, you almost kind of felt like there was a plan in place.
Right. And Cam Atkinson did remain a bright spot, to be fair. Like, that trade still looks perfectly fine. Say what you want about Jake Voracek, say what you want about Cam Atkinson. That trade is at bare minimum a solid trade.
Especially when you consider what they did at the end of the year with Atkinson, which is when it got to the point of no return, just get him out and don't play him anymore.
I agree.
And bring him back next year hoping that he stays healthy too. Like, I don't have doubts about him either. Like, Hayes, Couturier, Atkinson, I know they were hurt at the end of the year. I'm not really worried about it. I'm worried about Farabee because of it just happened. It's recent. It could be a longer timetable than 3 to 4 months, like they're saying. We have to worry about it. The Ellis thing, I don't even know if I care anymore. Like, it's like to an extent where I'm saying, like, until you have something constructive to say about his status,
don't say anything.
Right? Like, there's no news. He's just not going to play. Nope. Like, that's the way it seems.
And I think that's kind of where they're at with him at this point.
Well, if nothing else, like I said a couple minutes ago, getting DeAngelo is all about, like, hey, Ellis isn't going to be ready to play.
All right.
And I would have preferred that you observed the free agency landscape and did the best you could, if that was the case, to find somebody who at best could replicate the top pairing thing. Like, and I'm not saying, like, you would have to overpay for that probably, but, like, I don't know. Like, it's going to be weird to me if DeAngelo is not the top pairing guy now, because you're sure as hell paying him like it if that's the case. Like, to me, if like, it's going to look all sorts of wrong if DeAngelo does end up on the third pairing to be sheltered and they actually, like, promote York or something like that. You know what I mean? Like,
I have a feeling we're going to try Provorov Sanheim again. And you're just going to have DeAngelo Ristolainen.
You want to know what I think is going to happen, at least at the beginning? The schedule came out this week, too, which is kind of like a footnote on the whole damn thing at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't need to go into details, but I do know that there is I believe their last preseason game is October 4th, and their first regular season game is October 13th. So you've got a lot of time in between the first game. You have a lot of time as the preseason schedule rolls on, because they're playing preseason games on, like, September 24th.
Right.
And they don't play, like, so you've got a long...
It's a nice extended preseason.
So, well, which, by the way, is that's great news for Tortorella, because there's nothing better than having 3-4 weeks to
get your boys in shape,
drill home your point, right?
Yep. Well, and Torts has always been a cardio-heavy coach, so a little extra time is going to be fantastic for him.
I fully expect multiple top pairing combinations during this time.
I agree.
We'll see. Like, I don't doubt that you may see Provorov Sanheim. You'll probably see, and look, preseason is preseason, so don't take it as gospel. But
sure.
You'll probably see Provorov. You'll definitely see Provorov DeAngelo. There's no way you won't. I feel like that's what the given is right now. But you'll probably even see Provorov Ristolainen.
Probably.
Maybe you'll see Provorov York. Maybe you'll see.
That sounds fun.
Maybe you'll see Provorov insert name here because somebody might not be here yet. Like,
fair enough. Yeah, like I said, I've mentioned a couple times on this show, I certainly don't think Chuck Fletcher's done.
He's not done, but, like, this is what I'm wondering. Like, I don't think defensively, I think you can't do anything other than add a really low cost, low risk piece. Like, you've got to add somebody who's clear cut bottom six material, or like bottom pairing material, and deal with the fact that it's a cheap contract.
That's fair.
Like again, you're making the Keith Yandel signing, but not for it's not Yandel, I would say. But
and just by the way, I do want to throw a name out there, just as somebody that they could have gotten instead of Tony DeAngelo, for example. If you want somebody who can contribute offensively, who can serve kind of a similar role, Where do you think I'm going? I'm just curious.
Are you going to say John Klingberg?
I was going to say John Klingberg. And I feel like that's the guy that you probably could have given him a fairly similar deal. 2x5 is probably about where he's going to end up. And again, so that is a reported number for DeAngelo. But I think, go ahead.
Because there's one problem with that, and DeAngelo is still kind of betting on himself here. That's hence probably 2 years.
Sure.
Klingberg doesn't really have to bet on himself. Klingberg is the type of player very much like a lot of these other.
Yeah, he's signing a real deal at this point.
But the name of the game and a good way to further elaborate on this is the Chris Letang extension. Term's the name of the game.
Right.
These guys want job security.
Fair enough.
And which is how you get 35-year-old Chris Letang saying, "Give me 6 years and let me play to 41."
Right.
Like whether or not it looks like
by the way, he'll be retired for the last 3 of those years, but whatever.
Maybe he will, but see, at the same time, like there's a cap increase coming in a couple years.
Yep.
Like this offseason is about paying off the escrow from the pandemic years. The next step is they get a big cap increase because of the money from the TV deals and all that stuff.
And
all
the rumors is that's going to start 2 to 3 years from now.
I think it's after. I think it's not this like it's next off season. Like after.
I think it's going to be.
Yeah, it's after next offseason is what I'm saying. So like
not the 2022 offseason, not the 2023 offseason, but the 2024 offseason is where it's going to start to kick in.
Right, because of the fact that at that point in time you're going to you get 1 more year doing this, and then but even then, like I think that the contract, because there's going to be a boost coming in a couple of years, Letang for 6 at the number that he got, which was
makes a lot of sense.
6.1.
Because that cap number goes up, his cap percentage goes down, and his minutes can decline in kind.
And you can't deny that right now he's playing at a top pairing level.
Sure.
So, do you
on one leg half the time, but still good for him.
Yeah, but if he's playing like that on one leg, imagine fully healthy.
I know.
That's kind of why you defend it a little bit. Like, if you can make the argument he shouldn't play at all, then, for health purposes, then, and don't know the difference, you know what I mean?
Oh, he'll get LTIR retired by the end of that contract.
Maybe,
sure.
But either way.
All right, I'm done talking about this scumbag. Can we talk about the draft?
Yeah, we can talk about the draft. I've said my piece too about how I'm going to cover him and about how I don't think he's a fit and all that stuff. Like,
and listen, I just want to officially throw it out there, Tony. You're welcome on the show, buddy. I'd love to have a conversation with you. I really would. So the sickest name in the draft was not necessarily this guy, but he was up there with the 5th overall pick.
I know which one was probably sicker than this. I hope you think the same thing, because there was one I heard that was really awesome.
Listen, when you got a kid named Jagger, that's the best name in the draft. Anyway,
but wasn't there a kid? He went to Arizona, Maverick Lamoureux.
That's a pretty good one too.
That was a pretty sick name.
But the Philadelphia Flyers at number 5 select Cutter Gauthier. And now, by
the way, Cutter's his given name.
It's a good one.
I know. It's just you think it's a nickname. It's his given birth name.
Before we talk about the pick, I do briefly want to talk about kind of how the top 5 shook out.
Yeah, let's do it for sure.
Yeah, just real quick. We don't have to go super deep into it. But Shane Wright is a kid who has been around for a long time. 3 years ago, he was actually granted exceptional status to play in the OHL a year early, which is something that only the top tier names have been given. I believe the most recent was John Tavares, or one of the more recent names.
Was it?
He might not be the most recent.
McDavid wasn't?
Oh, you're right. You're right. McDavid did get exceptional. You're right. I forgot he played in the OHL.
McDavid was like the last one and all, and now like Wright was one and Connor Bedard's one, and like
right.
You've had 2 of them in back-to-back years. After I think McDavid might have been the first since Tavares.
Maybe you're right. So he got exceptional status. He went to the OHL early. He was expected to be, kind of projecting along this path with all these other players who received exceptional status. Right. And COVID kind of seriously derailed his development. And
sure, because the OHL lost.
They literally didn't play this past season.
He lost a lot of time.
And we saw a lot of OHL guys slip just out of pure lack of exposure to scouts. And when you don't see a kid play for a year, it's really hard to spend a top 5 pick on him.
Well, and here's the thing, and this kind of harps on parts of the top 5 as well. Why do you think all the U.S. National Development Team program kids are so popular?
Because they all got to play 60 games or whatever it was.
Yep. Why?
And so instead, the Montreal Canadiens in Montreal, by the way, kind of neat that they had the first pick in Montreal. Select Uri.
There's nothing better than like Marty St. Louis kind of kicked that off nicely.
It was really cool.
And by the way, I think it's really awesome the way that like they've embraced him. Like he has no connection to that team as a player during his playing career, Hall of Fame playing career, and yet they love him.
If his name was pronounced St. Louis, they wouldn't love him quite as much.
I know, and I get it. And he goes up there, and he was.
If his first name was pronounced Martin, they wouldn't love him quite as much.
Okay, listen. Okay, I'm not trying to deny the fact that in the first 15 minutes of the draft coverage, that he might have been one of the only people who got up there and actually spoke flawless French.
But man, it was sure funny watching some GMs stumble through. Parlez-vous, Montreal. But either way,
hello, bonjour, Montreal.
Right.
Merci beaucoup.
So you're right.
Better than some of them.
It was better than most of them. So Uri Slafkovsky goes number 1.
Yeah. A classic like recency pick kind of.
Yep. A guy who got to play a whole bunch of games against men this year.
And I don't care that the Olympics is kind of like it wasn't the best of the best as it could have been. I don't care. Like the Olympics put that kid on the map big time.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm not trying to like I think he was always top 5 projected anyway, but like he got number 1 talk after the Olympics.
Well, one thing that I thought was interesting listening to the latest 32 Thoughts podcast was the fact that they mentioned there wasn't that normal rush of guys this year who made a name at World Juniors.
Sure.
Who had a great 8 games in December and launched themselves up 30 draft spots.
Right.
Which we see every year. Every year we see guys break out at World Juniors, come back, get traded to a contender, make the Memorial Cup, may end up in the first round. Out of nowhere. It always happens.
It's really funny you're saying that because is the exception to the rule quite possibly the name that we have on the screen right now?
Well, and I think yeah.
His World Juniors stuff helped.
Well, that's fair. But I do think Uri Slafkovsky kind of got that from the Olympics, right? He didn't get the World Juniors bump, but he got the Olympic bump, and the lack of the World Juniors bump really helped him out.
Well, sure, because of the fact that when look, it's one thing if you're in World Juniors and you get put on the map because you were the best player on your World Junior team and you're lighting it up, and that's great because you're doing it against kids your age.
And there's a big spotlight on World Juniors. Like, it matters.
The biggest thing that happened to Slovakia in the Olympics was they beat the U.S. in the quarter. And who's front and center for that team? Uri
Slafkovsky.
Right. So, like, that kind of puts you on the map.
Well, and a performance like that also helped his Slovakian teammate get drafted second overall.
Simon Nemec.
Yes. Who will be playing for the New Jersey Devils. When's the last time the top 2 picks in a draft were Slovakian?
I don't think it ever happened because it was like, what a day for Slovakia hockey.
Right.
Holy smokes. It was that, which, look, it was cool to see. Don't get me wrong. Like how many years do we get like, oh yeah, it's the Canadian 1-2 or it's a Canadian US or maybe it's 2 US kids, but like we don't, or guess what? Sometimes, yeah, you know what? It can be one of those other powerhouse countries. Like it could be Sweden. Like, okay, let's take Sweden, for example, too, where it's like, you know what? The Sedin twins go 2-3. Like, it happens. Like, sometimes you get 2 kids who are from one of those European countries, and they're among the best, but it doesn't really happen with Slovakia.
On an average year, how many of the top 10 draft picks would you expect to be Canadian or American? Probably 6 or 7.
I'm combining the 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say 7.
How many do you think there were this year?
Well, obviously not the first 2. I know that David Juracek went 6, and he's Czech. So that's another one who wasn't. So I'm piecing through because I looked up enough of these names. I'm trying to piece my way through here. Obviously, the Flyers picked an American kid. Shane Wright's Canadian. Logan Cooley's American. So I'm through 6, and I've got 4 American Canadians so far, right?
Who did you say? I was going to say it's 3. You have Logan Cooley, who's an American, Shane Wright, who's a Canadian, and Cutter Gauthier, who's an American.
Okay, so Buffalo at 9 picked Savoy. He's Canadian. That's 4. I believe the defenseman that Chicago took was North American.
You think Pavel Mintyukov was American, huh?
Oh, no. I'm thinking about the other guy then. It wasn't Chicago. It was...
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Chicago. Chicago drafted Kevin Korchinski at 7. Yes, I'm sorry. I thought you said 10. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's North American?
He is Canadian, yes.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
Well, I spoiled it then. The Ducks took Mintyukov at 10.
No, I get that. So, all right, so I'm already up to 5. Let's.
That's it. That's the end. Marco Kasper at 8 was Austrian, and then Pavel Mintyukov at 10 is Russian.
By the way, Marco Kasper at 8 might be a really good pick down the line. Like it's gonna need, you're gonna need some time, but
you know who made that pick? The Detroit Red Wings.
Detroit Red Wings.
Steve Yzerman don't miss.
No, but you know who made a great pick down the line because for somebody who could have gone top 10 and didn't?
Okay.
Nashville. Joachim Kemmel. Outstanding pick where they got him.
Yep.
Outstanding pick.
By the way, another one of those top names in the draft went 14 to the Winnipeg Jets. Rutger McGroarty.
Oh yeah, I saw some people tweeting as this went on I'll fully admit
that's a name right there.
I'll fully admit after the 5th pick, I was kind of a little bit tuned out of the draft. Like
me too.
Here's the thing. I got to admit, the picks were kind of flying in this year. Like,
yeah, 3-minute timers were pretty encouraging.
It was still a long draft by the end of it. Like it was 11 o'clock at night, and it was still finishing up.
It was 4 hours.
Yeah, but you know what did happen? The next day went ridiculously fast. Like they were just whipping. I thought the Flyers didn't pick again until 69th overall. Nice with the in the 3rd round, right? Now you figure if you don't have a pick until the 3rd round, and I get it's an early 3rd rounder, but you figure you've got an hour for the 2nd round, right?
Yeah,
no, this was like 35 minutes. Here we are, like boom, and they were done. That draft that started, it resumed at 11 a.m. I want to say they were done by like 2:30.
And then one more thing I did want to mention from the first kind of the top 5. I know we were running through that real quick.
Right.
Is so basically Juraj Slafkovsky goes 1, Simon Nemec goes 2, Logan Cooley goes 3. Now you'll notice I haven't mentioned the name Shane Wright, and he ends up slipping to 4. He ends up slipping to the Seattle Kraken.
2 out of those 3 names I had in the top 3 anyway, so I wasn't surprised.
And you know what the crazy part is? Before the Seattle Kraken pick Shane Wright, Gary Bettman steps up to the podium and says, I have 2 trades to announce.
I know, 2 trades.
And the crowd starts booing him.
Right, until he says,
wait, you're going to like this.
Yeah, both of them involve the Canadiens.
They involve Montreal. And for a second, I thought, Kent Hughes, you crazy bastard. I swear, I thought he was trading for number 4. I don't know how he was doing it. They ended up moving Alexander Romanov, a 1st-round pick, a couple other picks. They ended up making some insane moves and acquiring Kirby Dach from the Chicago Blackhawks.
By the way, that whole sequence, and I'm like, look, I don't think Kirby Dach is like. I know he's a 3rd overall pick. I don't know. I don't think he's an immediate. Like, I need to see the fit on Montreal to go. Hey, like, I
think he is stellar for that team.
I don't doubt that that's a possibility. I want to see it. But acquiring him was not the same as the other guy Chicago traded earlier in the day. Like in the moment, it could be down the line. I really don't want to say.
Within the next 5 years, when that team is a wagon, because that Montreal team is coming, and they're coming fast, hard, and heavy. Yeah, Kirby Dach is going to be an anchor on that team.
Because it feels like they have an identity, because the coach that they brought in midway last year seemed to establish something.
It's insane. They made the Stanley Cup Finals. They tore it all down and rebuilt in 1 year.
I don't know if they tore it all down, but I get your point. And to an extent,
we dumped Shea Weber, and Carey Price is still questionable. Like, we dramatically changed the course of the franchise in essentially 1 season.
Right.
And the rebuild, the air quotes rebuild, is already like 60% done. It's insane.
I do want to talk about another team that made a trade that day. But before I do want to touch on what you're talking about with the Doc trade and all that. Because that's masterful asset management to work that whole thing around to go from, hey, listen, first of all, they picked 1st overall already.
Yep.
Then to find a way to work out a deal to trade Romanov to get to the Islanders to get what they need to trade with Chicago to get Kirby Dach. Like, that's like, I believe I saw it again. Don't hold me to this. I forget which person put it out there, but someone reported it was like They literally gave Kent Hughes an assignment. Chicago gave Kent Hughes an assignment and said,
"Go get a first."
If you want to get Kirby Dach, you've got to go get this first. And he went out and got it. Like, impressive.
He understood the assignment.
Yeah, that was impressive. But I do want to talk about another team that made a trade on draft day, and it like.
Is this Toronto?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
It's earlier. It was earlier in draft day than the draft itself. Now you know where I'm going. But before we do, actually, can we talk about this kid first? Because
absolutely.
You got past Shane Wright, so let's get to Cutter Gauthier.
Yeah, Cutter Gauthier, drafted 5th overall out of the U.S. National Development Team program. He is a center/left winger. There's talk about him playing center at the NHL level. It's going to depend on how he adjusts to the game and kind of how he matures into being an NHL player.
Do you want me to kind of fill in what I know? Because
absolutely.
I know a lot more about this subject right now. So here, first things first, this is obviously not a guy who immediately comes and helps your team.
Right.
There's development that's going to be involved here. He's as is the case with most American prospects that are drafted that come out of this U.S. National Development Program. There's a college lined up. Like they're committed to a college. Right. He's committed to, of all places, one that we've talked about more than enough times on this show already. He's committed to Boston College. Now, the good news about that, though, is Boston College is a pretty good program.
Yeah.
So if you want to kind of run through the gauntlet of NHL preparation, you can do a lot worse than going to New England, right?
And I did want to mention, by the way, his father, Sean Gauthier, was a goalie in the NHL. He played one game, and it was a shutout.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't really look up his dad's numbers. He
played one game for the San Jose Sharks in 98-99.
Okay, by the way, the backstory of his father really is that, or the most important detail of that backstory is that at one point in time, he was playing for the Reading Royals, who are now the Flyers ECHL affiliate, and that is where Cutter Gauthier's parents ultimately met.
Oh, that's neat. I did not know that.
His mother is from that area, so he already has local ties, and he even said it's going to be cool that they can come to see him.
And that was his last season in North America, and he played 23 games, had a .226 goals against average and a .913 save, which for the ECHL is quite solid.
Yes, it is. You know what? What he did with his playing career is he made a very solid living because he played for a while and was well traveled and nonetheless
played a couple years in Europe. Cutter Gauthier was actually born in Sweden.
Right.
He does have American citizenship. American citizenship would play for America internationally, as we've seen with him being in the development team program, et cetera, et cetera. But he was actually born while his father was playing for Skellefteå. I'm not saying that correctly, in Hockey Allsvenskan out in Sweden.
Okay.
Just worth noting.
Let's get back to the kid. So can I tell you what I love about the pick?
Is it the fact that he's 6'2", 201?
That doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. It's that there's time with him.
Yep.
I love the fact that he's going to go to college immediately. It's not a knock not a knock to say I don't want to have to think about him for the year, but I'm glad I don't have to really think about him for the year.
Right.
Like if the game plan is
college prospects disappear. You watch guys in junior, you hear stuff about guys in junior. When guys go to the NCAA, they just fall off the map, and then they come out, and sometimes they're Adam Fox.
So let's put it this way, okay? Because here's something about him that's I find really not really interesting, but it's a detail that's important to this. Like I said, there's time with him and all that type of stuff, but when you commit to play college, for whatever reason, like you said, they disappear for a while, but they also tend to come into the league and be the most ready for the league.
Yes.
Even down to a guy like Noah Cates last season. How good did he look down the stretch that you're Noah Cates is not at, and this is kind of an, again, under the radar kind of story for the week, but the Flyers are having development camp starting on Monday, and it'll run through the week. Noah Cates isn't part of that group.
Okay.
Cam York is, and then, Bobby Brink typically would be, and Bobby Brink, there's a little, I'll just mention it here, and we'll just kind of, there's little known about it right now, but there's reportedly he suffered an off-season hip injury, and it could be significant.
Looks like he's going to miss some time.
It looks like he's going to miss some time, but we're waiting for more information.
Yeah.
So maybe it's something we get into next week.
Yeah, we'll definitely have some updates on next week's show. Probably an update on him. Definitely a recap of free agency, by the way. So make sure you come back next week.
But to go off of other guys like that, Ronnie Adder's going to be in development camp. Like these are guys who, but we've seen them. They've played NHL games. Noah Cates isn't. Noah Cates is training at home. He's not hurt. There's nothing wrong. He's just training at home in Minnesota.
Okay.
What does that tell you? That tells you that after his little audition last year, playing at the NHL level, that it seems like he's coming to camp where the expectation is
planning to make a spot.
Right, you're in. Like, it feels that way anyway, which is the right way to approach it. But these kids come out of college, so I hope that, first of all, what I hope with him is that they do stick to the game plan, which is to play him at center. One of the things I heard, and I'll give credit, I remember where I heard this one, so I'll give credit on this one. Anthony Sanfilippo said this on Snow the Goalie recently, that Cutter Gauthier, he was told anyway, would have potentially gone as high as, like, let's say, top 3 if they would have played him in World Juniors at center and not on the wing.
Wow.
He played on the wing. Did he have success? Absolutely.
And sometimes that's the problem with playing for a team as deep as the U.S. team is.
Like the funny part is that he gets drafted. He was, he played with Logan Cooley. He played with all these other guys that are going. Every one of them.
It's the same thing as like the 2010 Canadian team had like 9 centers on it or something ridiculous. And it's just one of those things that happens at the international level is any center can just go play wing, but you do lose a little bit of, it's not your natural position.
Well, yeah, exactly.
But regardless, the kid is, like I said, he's big, 6'2", 201. He's still, 18 years old, could fill out a little bit more, might grow an inch. I was growing until I was 21 or 22. 65 points in 54 games last year. And we're talking about the U.S. national development team. You're not exactly playing the highest level of competition. You're
right.
In 22 USHL games, which is actually reasonable competition, he had 28 points, including 19 goals. Like the kid's goal scorer.
Right. He's got a lot of and the thing that people think is most NHL ready with him, it's does he play a physical game? He can. He's very dedicated to the two-way thing. He sounds like the type of kid that John Tortorella would love because he talked all about defensive play first, but yet he also possesses a shot that people think is going to translate.
Okay.
So,
and that
I don't want to just jump and tell you he's the next 40 goal scorer that the team's going to have. I also don't want to tell you that he's not going to pan out to be somebody who can score a few goals.
Right. And when you read draft breakdown coverage, there was kind of that top 3 or 4. You knew it was your Slavkovsky, Wright, Cooley, and then we knew that the Devils were really looking at defensemen. So we knew a guy like Nemec was probably going to go fairly high.
And I really toyed with, like, when I did targets, and fully admitted this on 97.3 leading up to the draft, the concept was Slavkovsky, Wright, Cooley. I had actually said, because the one guy who was getting talked about ultimately the way that things went with Shane Wright was Cooley.
Right.
And I even said if Cooley somehow gets to 5, I'd be sprinting up to the, to hand the ticket. But
like I said, I think those were the top 3. And then the whole thing about the Devils wanting a defenseman kind of filled that spot as well.
So I was toying back and forth because when I did targets, Gauthier was probably the top forward I had on there, but I went back and forth between the 2 defensemen. Okay. And there is one element to me that there is one element to me that would have just built this thing from the back end out and gone with Juracek there because I would have liked that. I'm not saying I'm disappointed with this.
Sure.
Especially if he does translate to a center position because it is an element that's important at both ends of the ice. So I'm not saying I'm devastated by it. And like I said, there's a difference between a guy like Gauthier that is going to go into the college program, need some time, and what happens if Wright makes it to 5?
That's what I was saying. Like once that top tier comes off the board, those couple players, and then again, Devils taking that defenseman, the Flyers kind of had the next bite at the apple from that next batch of players, and there's gradient to it, but it starts to get kind of flat from there. Like those top 3 really stood out. And if any of them had gotten to 5, if in an alternate universe where Montreal takes Wright first, if Slavkovsky slipped to 5, you got to take him.
Right.
If any of those guys were there at 5, you have to take them. But with none of them being there, you really did kind of get the first bite at the apple on everyone else.
It was, by the way, it was really funny to watch as Wright got to 4 right before. No, it was really funny to watch the people who were trying to, like, who were countering each other. That was, I don't know if the Flyers are really sold on him either, so he could keep slipping. No, the Flyers would love.
They would have taken him.
I think
they would have taken him.
Here's the thing about him, though, and I wouldn't have had a problem if they would have taken him. Obviously, if he goes from projected 1 or 2 to 5,
do you make him wear the number 19 or?
Yeah, I don't know, but not Shane Wright. Shane Wright's carved out his own unique number here.
I know,
by the way.
But if a guy slips to 5 and you take him and he's a center, he's going to come in and you're going to push him straight to the NHL. You're not going to send him back to juniors, and then he's going to develop this weird concussion thing.
What number Gauthier is wearing in all the pictures, right?
I mean, it should theoretically be 22, right? Just because that's the draft year?
No. Of pictures of him.
Oh, no, I haven't actually seen any pictures of him.
Like when playing? He's wearing 19.
Is he really?
Yeah. I hear you. But
Cutter, no.
But the thing with Shane Wright, to me, if Shane Wright ended up being a Flyer, I don't know that you want to have a guy that you feel like, don't get me wrong, if the guy came into camp and wins a spot and keeps it up, there's no like wrong in rushing the guy per se, or like whatever. Right. It's not that way. But if, like, I don't know if the franchise needed the pressure of, this guy should have gone 1 or 2. He went 5, but he's ready to play. You should get him in your line. Like,
I like the fact that they drafted a college kid,
right?
Because it doesn't matter what the Flyers say. If Cutter Gauthier says, "I'm going to college," see ya.
Yep.
Whereas if it's the OHL, then I know the player probably can choose to go back to the OHL, but you get what I'm saying.
Well, right. But here's another thing about it. Like, I know we've been on Chuck Fletcher plenty over the course of the weeks, and he's like, one of the right things he said over the weekend when it came to Gauthier was, he's going to Boston College this year. We'll deal with the rest, because he got asked the same question. Gauthier said 1 year at Boston College, and then he thinks he'll be ready to play in, like, professionally.
Minimum 1 year at Boston College.
And Fletcher's answer was, he's going to Boston College this year. Then we'll see what happens.
That's fine. That is Chuck's best answer. All right.
Like, isn't it like that? And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's at least a good approach for this kid, as opposed to. And by the way, I think that Shane Wright in Seattle is going to be a great fit because of the fact that that's actually a franchise that should play him now. Like, you don't exactly have a whole hell of a lot. It's a draw. Ticket-wise, it's a draw. And he probably fits in talent-wise better than most that you could get. And
he gets to work under developmental genius Dave Haxtell.
Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
All right. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the draft, or are we ready to move on here to our little free agency preview? Because I don't know a ton about some of the other guys. I do know that I saw some good reviews and good things about the 3rd round pick that the Flyers made, who I think a lot of people thought would have gone 2nd round, which was Devin Kaplan. Okay.
So keep his name on the radar, because I've heard some good things about him.
But we'll be honest, the chances of any draft pick really beyond the 2nd round making the NHL,
right? And that's why
it's magic beans.
Like, I didn't because they didn't have a 2nd round pick this year. I didn't write a draft day 2 preview the way I typically do, where I list some names that are still on the board. Right. I literally just took it from the angle of, like, they have 5 picks, which they ultimately did still end up with at the end of the day. They have 5 picks. The focus sounds like, and Chuck kind of alluded to that at the end of the day on day 1, which was like, hey, it could be a day for trading.
Sure.
And they weren't the only ones who were making trades, by the way. Like, there was a few others that were scattered in there.
For the record, Flyers legend Peter Mrazek got salary dumped to the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, but that was still on night 1, I think.
Oh, right? You're right. That was. Yeah, because they actually traded a 1st round pick as part of that.
Right. And I like, there was a couple others too. Like, I know what you're talking about. Like, night 1, like, there was Zach Cassian went to Arizona, and that was part of a pick deal that, like, moved 1st rounders. It was pretty crazy stuff. Yeah, it was probably the most action-packed draft of the last several years. And here's the thing. You know why it was? because Slafkovsky went number 1, which may not have been like, it's a mild surprise. It wasn't huge.
Right.
Nemec went number 2, and all of a sudden everybody's mock drafts were ripped up.
Oh, yeah.
And at that point in time, it was, okay.
As soon as the Devils stuck to their guns and took a defenseman there,
right,
things were going to get wild.
And it was, everybody ripped up their mock drafts, and it was game on, right? Like, who knows what goes where. But
man, if you're the Devils, I wonder if they shopped that pick after Shane Wright didn't go 1. Like, I wonder.
Oh, it would be interesting. But the last thing I'll say not on Cutter Gauthier specifically, but like this whole premise here also is one of the things I said on Friday or on Thursday leading up to was the Flyers are going to make a good pick if they, like, in the sense that they'll make a good pick if they pick a guy that people think is the right in that area of the draft. And
I think they did that.
Right, and I think they did that too.
I agree.
Is he a good pick down the line once he makes it to the NHL? Could be good. Could be great. Like it's got to evolve into a great pick, though.
Right.
I think we've all, like, especially from watching the way that this team's had prospects that people thought were really good and it doesn't pan out. Prospects are lotto tickets. Draft picks are lotto tickets that you take a chance on a guy and hope he develops or hope you develop him. I think now, I've given up on the idea of sitting here saying, oh, that's a bad pick, that's a good pick. Like, now on draft day, they should all be good picks, and you turn them into what they are.
Speaking of deep draft picks who developed into something more, in the 2011 NHL Draft, round 4, pick number 104, the Calgary Flames selected Johnny Gaudreau.
Yeah, here we go.
So, Kevin, our next show is going to be in 2 weeks.
No, I thought we were doing one later in the week.
Oh, you're right. We did talk about maybe doing one next week, or we'll figure it out.
Let's put it this way. I'll tell you why we were going to do that. Because
by our next show, is Johnny Gaudreau a Philadelphia Flyer?
I don't want to definitively say yes, but I do feel like there's a really good chance of it.
If you've been listening to the show for a long time, you know that means yes.
That's
Kevin saying yes, but I just want to leave myself an out. So what do you think this man, has there been any speculation on what a deal might look like in Philadelphia? Now, we've heard a little bit coming out of Calgary, but
okay, so here's I'll try to feed as much information as I've got and go along with it, because I there's certain things, and some of it's been like, I had heard the same thing. Pierre LeBrun was tweeting a lot of this stuff on the Calgary side of things anyway. That the Calgary had made an offer, wanted an answer by a certain point on whether or not he was going to accept. And I believe that they were talking about something that would have been, I don't know if he ever said it was max term, which would be 8 years if it was Calgary. But I know that the cap hit was going to be $9.5 million.
That's a rich deal.
It is. Now, that's really where we left everything. I know that at the time that this was being discussed, I had heard something about how, let's put it this way, I had heard, and this might not have ended up being completely true, because I had heard that the deadline that Calgary wanted an answer was like middle of the week this past week.
Okay.
And it turned out like the draft
before
hit,
the draft, right?
Right. And the draft hit, and there was still talk about they nope, they want an answer pretty soon, but it hasn't happened yet. There's no
I wonder
answer.
if they were exploring the option to trade his negotiating rights.
It was possible, and I'll get to that in a second. So as the draft went on, it was still they want to get an answer soon, but there's no answer yet, and it wasn't like a big deal. And even after the draft was over, the story was that they were optimistic that they could re-sign. They felt like both parties wanted to be there and all that stuff like that. So the story was that. I am of the impression right now that there's a strong possibility that Johnny Gaudreau gets to market.
Okay.
Now, as of 3 days ago, before the draft, the possibility of somebody trading for his rights was very much on the table.
Okay.
I think we're a little bit past that point now, because
we're
let's put it this way. We're finishing up recording this. We're pushing Monday morning here, or midnight on Monday into going into Monday. In 12 hours from midnight going into Monday, you're 48 hours away from free agency opening, and people can sign wherever. I think you're kind of past the point of trade for a guy's rights. And at the very least, here's what I have the impression of, because I got asked this question on Twitter earlier in the week about why would kind of a combination of why would he want to sign here? Wouldn't it just be an overpay kind of thing? All that type of stuff. the bottom line here is that it's not completely just the Flyers, right?
Sure. Right. Well, I've heard that the Devils have
but here's
kicked
the thing.
around an offer.
He wants to be. I think the idea is that now that he has the freedom to choose where he goes,
he wants to come close to home.
He wants to be closer to home. He got married last offseason. His wife is from the area as well, by the way. So you're either talking and like it's no secret. Like his father coaches, like all like we know, like there's a lot known about the family, and like I said, he's got pretty much got like a good reputation.
Do they still own Hollydale?
Oh, they might. Yeah, I guess.
So I know they did at one point in time.
I know that. Let's put it this way. I'll tell you one thing I know for a fact. His Guy Gaudreau, his father, still coaches one of the Flyers elite teams.
Okay.
Like the 15-year-old AAA team or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like next step before kids are getting to junior level almost. So it could be a multitude of possibilities here. It could be, it could be Philly, it could be New Jersey, could really be any of the New York teams. It could even be Washington in theory. Now, granted, you can deduct teams that probably don't have the cap to do this right now that also don't want to move cap. Like if you're the Rangers, are you moving cap because you want to add this guy now? Like
probably not.
No, like your team's pretty good the way that it was.
Right.
You're trying to find finalized little pieces. But you're not moving a ton of stuff to open it up either. Like you're not signing another near double-digit contract or whatever it may be, right? The Devils probably can make it work. The Flyers would like to try to make it work. It's no secret that the team that Gaudreau watched and idolized growing up was the Flyers. So that's where it kind of lends to the Philly thing. But there's a lot to do.
I do want to draw a comparison.
Sure.
And I'm going to call it the most recent example of a player going home. I'm going to talk about John Tavares in Toronto.
Not bad. I understand that.
It has been made known that there was so John Tavares ended up signing a 7-year, $11 million deal in Toronto.
Okay.
There was an offer on the table, and we know this. San Jose offered him 7 by 13.
Okay.
He passed on a lot of money to come home. Now I know they're in slightly different situations.
Sure. And there's another. By the way, there's another example that I think, if I'm not mistaken, not a coming home story, but a guy who went to the team he wanted to play for and I think took less money. Didn't Artemi Panarin do that in New York?
Something like that.
Like, wasn't there a story that there was more money on the table somewhere else, but he went to New York because it was I want to play in New York?
Right. I believe it was New York and Florida that were both throwing themselves at Artemi Panarin.
Now,
man, imagine how different that Florida team would look.
So think about something for a second. Is it possible that because there's one element to this, because you asked the question, what could a deal look like for Gaudreau in Philly?
Right.
There's one possibility that says the guy wants double digits, right? Like there's one possibility, and it is tough. But listen, on one hand, I would not be shocked if you were looking at a 7 by 10.5 here.
Wow.
I know it's a lot. I'm just trying to listen. This is me telling you, brace yourselves.
That makes me nervous for Joel Farabee's next contract.
I hear you. Now, but here's another factor. If it's really if it's all location and all that stuff,
hopefully Chuck can use that.
Maybe 9.5 is enough, and all he just wants is the contract offer. Like, please offer me the contract to play in Philly, and that's it. I'm done.
John, listen. Here's what we're gonna do. We'll give you 7 years. What do you think about 6.5? Come on, John.
That's not happening.
Come to Philly, 6.5. Come, you get to play with Kevin Hayes. Come on, and Cam Atkinson. Listen, we have the Johnny Gaudreau tampering committee infinity gauntlet, right? We have Kevin Hayes. We have Cam Atkinson. We have Patrick
Tony
Brown.
DeAngelo.
We just added 77. The thumb.
Yes.
One more gem. Come on, Johnny. Snap your fingers. Win a cup. Come on.
Well,
maybe.
Win a cup, maybe.
We got 7 years. It's fine. We got time.
Well, I do think that that's a possibility. Okay, can we talk about something really quick that ties into this? Because there's a lot made about the fact that Alex DeBrincat was available and then got traded to Ottawa for, again, similarly, 3 draft picks.
Right.
Now, granted, 2 of them were firsts. One down the line, one of them, or no,
I would.
No, 2 of them weren't first. I'm sorry, one of them was, but
I would trade almost anything for Alex DeBrincat.
It was a first, second, and then another. What was it? I think it was another second down the line. I believe
Something like that. Yeah. It was nothing.
Right,
Nothing.
It feels like it. The reason why it feels like nothing, though, is because of the fact that here's the way that Alex DeBrincat can control the whole scenario. He can play next season under his current contract, get a qualifying offer the following year that would be $9
1-year deal, walk to UFA.
But it's $9 million for the qualifier.
Yep.
And then he can walk as a UFA and get his other deal, even if it's just 10. It could be 10.
Right.
But he can go wherever the hell he wants to, and you lose the security. So, like, I'm not trying to sit here and tell you, like, the thing to me about Ottawa, and I said this on the air on Friday or on Thursday when the trade happened, Ottawa to me was better equipped to make that trade even with the uncertainty because of the fact that at the end of the day, you've been picking in the top 10 for how many years in a row?
Yep.
And last year or 2 years ago, you had 3 first-rounders.
You just have so many assets.
So let's this way. Let's just do the first-rounders for a second. Shabbat was from years ago. But it still applies, right?
Kachuk was from years ago.
Well, no, not as many, though. Kachuk was 18.
That's fair.
So Kachuk.
Was Josh Norris a first-round pick?
Josh Norris is a little different. I'll get to him in a minute.
Oh, they acquired him, didn't they?
Kachuk was drafted. Stutzla's drafted. Jake Sanderson, who's coming, drafted. How about, last year Tyler Boucher was drafted. And you've got this grouping. And the last 2 aren't even really factors yet. They've also struck on other draft picks of their own that weren't first-rounders. Drake Batherson, Alex Formenton. Then you add in acquisitions. Josh Norris, acquisition, right?
And they haven't been perfect, by the way. They just bought out Colin White, who was, I believe, the 10th overall pick within the last couple of years as well. So they have missed on some things.
Sure, but I'd be willing to bet anything that Colin White was bought out because they were talking about this trade.
Oh, absolutely. He was bought out, and it made the exact amount of money for DeBrincat. Absolutely.
So, but look at this team right now. DeBrincat, Stutzla, Kachuk.
Do you want to play against a line that has a power play unit? DeBrincat, Kachuk, Shabbat? Hello? It doesn't matter who the other 2 guys are. I could be on that power play unit.
Okay, guess what? I can tell you somebody else who I can picture being on that power play unit, and I don't think they're done.
I agree.
I think that somebody, you're talking Johnny come home. Maybe somebody else goes home too.
Yeah.
Is it distinctly possible?
I think there's a real chance. I'm going to say a bold statement here.
Okay.
I think the Ottawa Senators end up with one of the following 2 players.
Okay, I can't wait to hear the second one because I already know the first one.
Maybe both, but probably not.
Okay, so who do you think outside of the obvious?
The first is Claude Giroux, and I'll just say the obvious here.
Yes.
I think Claude Giroux there's a chance Claude Giroux goes home, signs for 4 years at $4 million, or some sort of ridiculous help the
Ottawa wins, right? Yeah.
Or
who's the other guy?
Who's the team we just talked about losing a big free agent?
Team we just talked about losing a big free agent
who may or may not come to Philadelphia.
What, Calgary?
Now, who's their other big free agent?
Oh, you're not serious right now. You think that? Yeah, but that's a little different.
Why not?
Do you think that, what are you thinking? You think you're going to trade for him or they're going to offer sheet him?
Either one.
You think that there's a possibility?
I think there's a chance the Ottawa Senators acquire Matthew Tkachuk.
We try to offer sheet Matthew Tkachuk to put the 2 brothers together.
Tell me.
Smokes, that would be interesting.
Tell me that wouldn't be the most fun hockey north of the border this fall.
I'm going to counter your point for one reason and one reason only, and I'm not trying to burst your bubble on this. I don't know if they feel like they can do it with DeBrincat because you have 2 players in the same boat.
Maybe. That's fair.
For RFA status. You do, to be honest, this is when Claude Giroux signs the $4 million deal.
But what if you do both?
I don't know.
They have the money.
Yeah, but do they have it longer than this?
They got a new building coming. They're already building towards that new LeBreton Flats. Okay, they're going to try to get some momentum heading in towards that. They finally have an ownership group willing to spend a little bit of money.
Let's not jump off of with the Tkachuk.
Yeah, you're right.
But let's stick to Giroux for a second because seriously, remember what the laughing point of that whole thing was, by the way? He got traded to Florida, and the idea was, okay, if he's not going to come back here, which everybody kind of perceived,
fair.
It was over and done with in Philly, the thought process was, I guess he's going there to hopefully re-sign in Florida, right? And the idea was like,
Sure.
and the idea was there's an outside chance he could go to Ottawa because that's home, right? But a lot of people laughed about it, like Ottawa, they don't even have a window for winning.
If your first line,
do you think that's the case now?
Alex DeBrincat centering Claude Giroux and Brady Tkachuk.
No.
Hello.
Nope.
Are you split them up?
No, it's you have DeBrincat centering. DeBrincat's a left winger.
He can play center. Claude's still taking the face off. DeBrincat can play the center spot.
No. You know what you do? Tim Stützle centering DeBrincat and Tkachuk.
Yeah, that's disgusting.
And guess what? You still haven't got, like, at that point in time, is because Norris is a center, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
So Norris centering Giroux and
Batherson, right?
Holy crap! What a top six.
Seems all right, and
and then your blue line is going to eventually evolve to be. By the way, another player they acquired was Brandstrom in the Mark Stone trade.
Yep. The problem they're going to run into is the same problem Detroit's going to run into in the next couple of years.
A lot of young players that you have to sign to keep.
Well, not only that, but just look at the top of your division: Tampa, Toronto. Boston's probably on the way down. You're probably going to be able to replace that Boston team. That's fair. Florida may splinter a little bit here after some consternation down there. Who knows what they're going to do in the next couple I get what you're saying. But right now, it sits, we had 3 of the top 5 teams in the NHL at the top of that division last year.
Right now, in year one, if Claude Giroux signs there, and you've just gotten DeBrincat and all that type of stuff,
if Claude signs there, it has to be a longer-term deal. There's no way this is a 1 or 2 year.
But take. Okay, so you got 2. Like, let's be realistic and say you got 2 years of DeBrincat, you get 4 years of Giroux if you do that, right? Like if you sign him to something like that, right?
Right. That would make sense.
If year one, you've got this group now that added those 2 players to some pretty good developing players when it was Stützle, Norris, Tkachuk, all that type of stuff, right?
If Matt Murray and Anton Forsberg are a reasonable goaltending duo, you have a really good hockey team there.
But what if your progress this year is nothing more than you're the 7 or 8? You're a wild card, but you get in.
I think
when you missed playoffs that many years in a row. I
was going to say, I think that city would go absolutely bananas for a playoff team.
Huge stepping stone for what could be to come, especially as you start to see the other things maybe splinter more. Because the thing that you're going to have in the early going right now, this is what makes these types of teams win. They're young. While they're still young and while you can't really overpay those guys,
and from a business perspective, it is great to have a good, young, exciting team in Canada's capital.
And what did we talk about at the beginning? The cap is going up eventually. Yep. What if it doesn't go up immediately, but you don't need to worry about it not going up immediately because
Claude Giroux's only making $4 million.
But mainly because you're young. When those guys need contracts, the cap space opens up. You give everybody a fair deal, and maybe also the other thing you try to do, like a lot of teams try to do, is talk people into making it work. Right. I'm only going to take $6 million because when I could make $8 million somewhere, because that $2 million needs to go to this guy. We need to make this work. I don't want to break this group up that much. This is what happens in Tampa. Tampa looks at everybody and talks to these people, and it's like when they're communicating with agents, it's, listen, this is how we're going to build the best team we can build, not you get more money than the next guy.
Right. And they've already started that, by the way. Brady Tkachuk is about to enter the second season of his big boy contract, basically. It's a total of a 7-year deal at 8.2 per.
Well, right. So
that's just spectacular business.
Right, because then you already know what you've got. Like, it's lined up.
Yep. And he's through for 5-6 years. At the end of that contract, he's going to be making like 6% of the cap. It's ridiculous.
It's brilliantly handled. So to put a bow on the whole free agency preview.
Yeah, and we're going to wrap up and get out of here soon.
Get out of here. This is exactly the way it's going to be. Because here's the funny thing. Yeah, no doubt about it. We're going into Monday here. It's only going to get louder from here. Johnny Gaudreau seems like he's going to go to market. And I've already said before, I said this to you, I've said this on radio appearances, if he makes it to market, he's going to get targeted by the Flyers.
Yep, absolutely.
Whether he signs, I'm not guaranteeing he's going to sign there, but he's going to be on their radar, and they are going to try.
They will have conversations.
The funny part about that, though, is I don't have a read on another free agent for this team.
I don't think they really have enough flexibility. I think they're putting all their eggs in the Johnny Gaudreau basket, and then we'll end up getting some bottom six Nate Thompson type guys to fill out the roster. And I don't know about Nate Thompson specifically, but
I'm not stopping there yet, because there's players on this roster that could be moved in another fashion.
Sure, that is true.
And you still have 48 hours until this all kicks in. So who's to say that you don't move a guy who you didn't think was going to be moving, especially as we get closer? Like I'm sorry, how I've been saying for a long time on this show, my gut feeling was Travis Konechny gets traded this offseason.
You have.
The thing is that I think that thought process, at least for this offseason, has a shelf life.
Okay.
You get to the end of this week, I don't think you're moving him. You're building your team with him in mind, right?
Well, then I'm going to hit you with a couple of rapid fires here, and I just want a quick yes or no from you.
Okay.
At the end of the week, by the time we record our next show, will this person be on the Philadelphia Flyers, in the Philadelphia Flyers organization?
Okay.
Johnny Gaudreau.
Man, I don't want to give a yes or no on that.
Yeah, come on.
60% yes.
Okay. Ivan Provorov.
Oh, this one's easier. Yes.
Okay. Travis Sanheim.
Yes.
James Van Riemsdyk.
It's not that I don't have an answer. Okay, how about an answer with a caveat?
Okay.
If they get Johnny Gaudreau, no.
Okay.
Because
you think it's at the expense of James Van Riemsdyk?
Well, because here's the thing. I do believe, and I'm not trying to elaborate too much on this because I know you want to do rapid fire, but I do really believe there's that much of a chance that Gaudreau could end up in Philly. I think that the stars are aligning for this. That's what they've wanted to go after the whole time. It feels that way anyway. And certainly, here's the other thing. You can get a player who does the same exact thing that Gaudreau does to an extent, or what his calling card for a line
sure,
would be, right?
But he didn't go to Gloucester Catholic.
No. Hold on a minute. Alex DeBrincat, Johnny Gaudreau. They both play the same position. They both do
score
the same thing. Yep. They both have the same type of role.
They're both built the same.
Why do you pick one over the other? Security.
Yep.
You don't want to trade the picks for a guy who you think you're going to lose in 2 years. You'd rather sign the guy who you're going to have for 7.
Fair.
Right? So when you pushed aside the I'm not trading the 5th overall pick for Alex DeBrincat thing, you pretty much focused on I'd rather get the guy who I can secure for longer term.
Yep.
So I think that they're going after that, but to me, now that you're doing the thing with DeAngelo and the contract is coming, I just don't see how this is supposed to work out without moving JVR in some way. So I honestly think if we're going to sit here but you're saying by our next show, but for me, I'll say it this way. If I'm going to write an article on Wednesday that says Johnny Gaudreau is a Philadelphia Flyer, then I'm going to probably need on Monday or Tuesday to write an article that says Flyers trade James Van Riemsdyk to blank.
Okay.
I think that that's what needs to happen for this to work.
Yep. I agree.
And the only other thing I'll say about the JVR thing is I'd be worried that it's going to cost something.
I agree.
That they shouldn't have to give up to make this work.
Fair enough.
The last thing that you want to hear right now is that they had to tie that 2024 first, that extra first.
Oh my God. To
this deal to make it so that the $7 million's gone.
I'm going to be so irrationally angry if that happens.
Now, because they just don't have the money. At the end of the day, you pretty much right now. I mean, here's the thing to try to put a bow on it.
Yeah.
If Ryan Ellis is going to go on long-term injured reserve,
right, and that'll save you some dollars.
Sure, because it's $6.25 million that you're going to try to remove from the whole thing right now, right? If that happens, and you already are banking on the $5 million for DeAngelo, let's just say it's going to be the 5. Forget what Gaudreau would make. You need to come up with more money, right? Yep. So let's take the 6.25 for the LTIR thing. Add in, let's be reasonable about it. Let's not say the full 7, but let's say 5 out of 7 for JVR.
Sure, you might have to eat a couple bucks there.
Right. So let's say that's $11.25 million. Gaudreau could potentially make 10.5, and DeAngelo's making 5. So that's $15.5 million to counter 11.25. How do you do that? How do you make the in between? It's
something else. Something else has to move.
Well, you send down when the roster starts. You send down every minor league, waiver.
Everybody with a 2-way contract.
Right.
Everybody eligible.
Every waiver exempt guy, which means Noah Cates, you're not on the final roster. Wink, wink.
You'll be up for the first game
until we move Ryan Ellis to LTIR and you come back.
Sure.
You can do it with him. You can do it with York. You can do it with with some of these other younger guys if they make it. You can also put Oscar Lindblom on waivers, knowing that teams are looking at him right now and going, not really, it's not about the player, but I don't want the $3 million cap hit.
Right.
Most teams by that stage of the season can't afford it.
Right. They just don't have that.
So you pass him through waivers, get him to the other side, and now what did I just open up? $4.5 mil? 4.75 mil? I think I just bridged the gap here.
Chuck Fletcher has a lot of thinking to do. So we will be back for our next show. We haven't exactly talked about when we're recording it yet. We'll figure it out. We will talk about it on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Kevin will tweet about it at Kevin_Durso. Make sure to follow us in both those places. You can find this show everywhere you find your podcast: Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SportsTalkPhilly.com. We're all over the place. We're on YouTube. Make sure to check out our YouTube channel. We're trying to grow over there. And we'll be back next week, and then we're settling back into the every other week for the summer. And
then we're going to have to get creative.
Yeah, we have probably one more big show, and then from then on, the news will be a little more sporadic. So be sure to come back next week because it's going to be a good one. So until then, we'll see you.